Pamela.
I'm Avon.
And I'm Kate.
And today we're dishing with you from Art and Soul, which is located at 415 New Jersey Avenue Northwest in the Liaison and Affinia Hotel.
And today our guest is cunning, perhaps betraying, and I think there's a murder mystery somewhere in her life. No, that's just her book. It's Jane Stanton-Hitchcock. Jane, thank you so much for being with us.
Kate, everybody, thanks for asking me.
Of course.
We've been hearing so much about your book. This is your fifth book. Fifth book, and this one you finally decided to have located right here in our nation's capital.
Washington, yes. Because I'm a New Yorker originally.
Oh.
So all of my books took place in New York, but I moved to D.C. with my husband, Jim Hoagland, who's sitting right over there, 15 years ago, and we decided it was time to do a Washington novel. There's a lot here.
So you said you were walking around Georgetown, walking your dog, and said, a murder could happen here.
Oh yeah, I'm always I am a mystery writer. I'm considered a mystery writer, although my books are really novels with murders in them.
Okay.
And somehow I got adopted by the mystery crowd, and thank you, God, because they are the most loyal, wonderful. They're like country western fans. I mean, they're just adorable. So I love
Very faithful.
People. Very faithful and very perceptive. No, but they are just marvelous. And I always think, now this would be a great place for a murder. So, you know, in Montrose Park, which is right up the street from me, is a fantastic place for a murder. You know,
and
it's
inspiring people.
It's all set around, you know, Montrose Park, Oak Hill Cemetery, Georgetown Cafe Milano, all the antique shops of Georgetown, John Rosselli, Amano.
Right.
You know, it just is, because my heroine owns an antique shop. She's going broke, of course, but which all antique shops are at the moment. But it all takes place around there, and so it was in a way a really fun novel to write. I also got to know part of DC which is really not known by a lot of people, thank God, which is the police department.
Right.
Wait, how do you do that kind of research?
Well, I had a wonderful friend, Carol Joint, who
we've talked to Carol before.
Yes, she's
Carol.
dished
we
with
love
us
Carol,
before.
and Carol said, I'll put you in touch with Chief Peter Newsham, and he met with me, and then I met with a wonderful Captain Morris, and we had all had lunch at Cafe Milano, and I was very inspired by what they told me and how police work works. And what's interesting about the district, actually, is that the park police are very different, because the park police come under the federal government. Right. So if you're murdered in the park, you don't get investigated by the DC police, and you know. So it's interesting.
Did you actually shadow a police person during a crime scene or anything?
No, I didn't.
Like that?
I wish I had. I mean, that would have been good. But
For your next book.
I shadowed other people though, and a lot of my book I hope not.
I hope not.
Well, but you never know. One of the things about my book is that well, back when I came here, the Chandra Levy case was breaking, and they thought for a while that she had been murdered by a serial killer, who was quite high up in Washington society. And as I went to those glittering dinners, I said, my God, you know, would I know evil if I sat next to it? And my answer in the book and in life is, you don't recognize evil if it looks like you do. So this book is about kind of not really recognizing masks. I mean, Washington is a great place for masks, and particularly social people, which I've always written about, society. You put on a mask when you go to a party. It's not really you. And so what you're seeing, you know, at the Kennedy Center galas, at the National Gallery openings, all those dinners and everything, is really not what's going on beneath the surface.
Bunch of people in masks.
And also, lots and lots of work gets done there, probably more than in Congress.
I would agree.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. So you mentioned earlier about shadowing. What I really liked about that is a special nuance in order to know that. In order to know that the DC police is in one area, and you know, if you get murdered in a federal park, you're under the park police. And that actually makes sense. So anybody who wouldn't know that, who reads your book, would say, "Oh my gosh, she actually did her work, did her research, did her background." So I love that.
You sort of have to do your research when you're writing about DC, and it's very complicated. For example, the Kennedy Center is also, you know, you're appointed chairman of the Kennedy Center by the president, and there's just a lot of political stuff going on that you know, I don't think ordinary Americans are that aware of, and I hope, you know, my book will illuminate, but not in a pedantic way, but in a way that's fun. Washington is a city of total contrasts, and what I've tried to do in the book is to show some of those contrasts, not just with the people, but with the institutions.
Right.
And also make it a really good twisty murder.
Because you based some of your characters on some real life.
Going to get to that.
Well, if you base the places on places you pass by, surely you base some of the people on people that you know here too.
You know, okay, I'm a fiction writer, so every character in my book is me, including the murderers. Okay?
Including the murderers?
Including the murderers. But, you know, as an observer, you know, you can't help but certain people pass by the parade and they stand out, you know, and then I kind of aim my pen at the ones who are particularly interesting for one reason or another, you know. You know, there's a big parade in Washington too, and it's constantly changing.
So I have a question about writing a novel like that. How long does it take you from beginning to end, from inspiration to end? And do you write every single day, like 1 page a day in the morning? What exactly is your system?
Well, it's very funny that you should ask that, because I was just reading over some of the very first drafts of this book, which are totally unrecognizable from the book that is
really?
today.
Wow.
Every novel is different. I think Norman Mailer said some novels are gifts. They just come out of you, and that's really lucky. This took me forever. I mean, I cannot tell you, because there were so many, there are a lot of threads in it, and I couldn't tie them all together at once. And then in one glorious kind of month period, when I was under deadline for the book, it all just came together. And it was almost as if I sat down with all of the previous drafts, thousands of pages. I mean, literally thousands of pages. And it's, to make something look effortless, you have to put in a lot of work. It's just like an athlete. To make that somersault, I know you're having an athlete come up next, I have to say, and to make that somersault look effortless, it's just like writing is a big somersault that you have to make, and it takes a lot of work.
Is it harder to write, would you think, to write fiction or nonfiction? I mean, I would assume fiction, nonfiction would be a little easier because you already have the story and the facts. However, I'm not a writer, so...
Well, it's very different. I mean, it's a very different sensibility. I don't think I could write nonfiction because you're really bound to details, and you've got to get everything right. I have a lot of friends who write nonfiction. I have one friend, Susan Cheever, who writes fiction and nonfiction. My friend Linda Fairstein, I'm a continuing character in her series of books. She was you know, she started the sex crimes unit in New York, and she's one of my great friends and heroines, and her first book was nonfiction, and then she went into fiction, but she based her fiction on all of her experience in police work. And sometimes I'll call her up and say, well, what happens if a detective does this, this, and this? She has a repository of all that stuff that I have to actually call or do research on. But fiction is a very, particularly mystery fiction, I think you just have to have a twisted mind to think of all these murderers all the time. And one of my characters is obsessed with serial killers, which I am, you know. And so I said, okay, I'll put my obsession in a book. It's kind of like you're watching characters. You need to be. My inner life has to connect with an obsession in the outside world, and hope that that obsession connects with something in other people to make a good book.
Well, I'm sure that it's connecting with a lot of people. You said that this book is, all the characters are you, but we were happy to really get to know the real you today. We thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for asking me. Yes. Thank you, guys. It's really been really fun.
And as always, we thank you for being with us. Check us out next time right here on The District Dish.